I'm Galip Dalay, Research Director of Sharq Forum. Here I have Steve Clemons, who is the Editor-at-Large of The Atlantic Monthly.
Yes, great to see you.
Great to see you, great to have you with us. I would like to talk with you about the upcoming American election. And first, what should we expect from the upcoming American election vis-a-vis the Middle East?
Well, I think the Middle East won't matter very much, except in the sense that most Americans here today or think about the Middle East through the prism of ISIS. And they see ISIS, which has been able to export attacks to various parts of the world, most recently in the United States to San Bernardino, California. It's a faulty lens, but it's a lens. And so it's the fear element in American politics. So I think that right now, the notion of a proactive strategy, be it in Syria, although Syrian refugees comes up now and now in American media, but nothing like it does in Europe today. It's a much more palpable problem in Europe than in the US. But Syria, the Iran deal, the circumstances of Israel, the tension between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the situation inside Iraq today, all of that has sunk rather low in the perceptions of American citizens. What's interesting is that the election is one that's also a placeholder for how Americans think about foreign policy in general. And what you can see both in the support for Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side and the support for Donald Trump is a frustration that America has not put enough attention on its own affairs, internal, on the economic conditions of its working class people, and on its own social contract. And in that formulation, both with Sanders and Trump, international engagement is looked at as a negative. So that would go, I think, as well with the Middle East. So while I wouldn't predict the complete withdrawal, we're flirting with a more robust isolationist tendency than we've seen in many, many generations of the United States.
More robust isolationist tendency.
Yeah.
What does that exactly mean?
It means that the United States is going to become less engaged in global affairs. I think that's going to happen no matter who wins the presidency. I think if Hillary Clinton, who's the most conventional of the leading candidates, wins, and she has a chance of winning, I think that it's going to be impossible for her to carry on with the same kind of internationalism that her husband did, or even the George W. Bush, or even Barack Obama, who had limits. I think that the next president of the United States, no matter who he or she is going to have a very hard time making the case for robust American engagement abroad.
So in this regard, it doesn't mean whether the next president is a Republican or a Democrat. We wouldn't see any major difference in the American foreign policy.
I would say something very important here, that this election matters less who the Republican candidate is and who the Democratic candidate is, because there are civil wars going on within both parties, and you can see that the two things that are being debated in both parties by various candidates are essentially economic conditions of the country, that's both there, and I also think whether America will be strong or weak. It's a very different kind of tension, so that in the Republican Party today, we may know a lot soon in the upcoming primaries, and I realize they may have gone on by people who are watching this video, but that the political circumstances then, if you had a Ted Cruz, a Marco Rubio, or a Donald Trump, those three people are as remarkably different as you can imagine. And so to call that a Republican view misses the fact that there is no consensus on these key issues, either in the Republican or the Democratic Party. So we're talking about party bosses that are, so every once in a while, every few generations, or in American politics, we have what's called a realignment of politics, and that's happening now. So what we used to traditionally think of as a Republican Party is going to look different in 1 year. And I think my suspicion is what we think of as the Democratic Party is going to look very different a year from now because of the incredible support for Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton is likely to win the nomination, but she knows that she is sitting upon a divided party that doesn't want to be engaged in lots of issues overseas, that wants to see the domestic social contract for working families rewritten, and it's going to make her a different kind of president.
In this election, whose foreign policy that you find the most interesting, irrespective?
So the one that's politically incorrect to say the most interesting is I find Donald Trump the most interesting. Because Donald Trump, who is a bigot, has fascist tendencies, who's run against Muslims and said horrible things about Hispanics, nonetheless looks interesting in many ways because many of his values, whether on gay issues or a whole variety are also liberal. He's a mix of impulses. But what makes him interesting, particularly with regards to the Middle East and Israel-Palestine, is that I don't think he was in a debate recently, a Republican debate, in which he said we favor Israel too much. We need to be more neutral. And when you think of him in a Netanyahu-like way, Barack Obama was not a bully to Netanyahu. Netanyahu was a bully. But I can't imagine Donald Trump being out-bullied by Netanyahu. That is a remarkable change. The fact that you both have muscle and a sense that the masculinity of that office is going to be applied without fear towards Israel and political fear, and that the traditional strength that the U.S. Congress has had in defending Israel's interests may be rolled back by a Donald Trump, that makes him interesting. The fact that beneath all of the bluster of Donald Trump is a kind of realism in foreign policy, both on Russia, on other kind of global affairs issues, and a kind of caution about American engagement. That's Nixonian realism beneath all the bluster of Donald Trump. That is interesting to me. It may not be something a Brent Scowcroft or a Richard Haas or one of the leading realists today would want to admit, but Donald Trump is more closely a classic realist than he is a neoconservative or a liberal interventionist like Hillary Clinton, which I'm kind of tired of those schools. They're out there. So that makes Donald Trump a fascinating character in foreign policy.
Interesting. Dear Steve Clemons, it was a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.